Yes.
Evening, everyone. I would like each group of color, based on your colors, to regroup and form the groups. Yeah. Okay.
Colleagues, I want to, with the permission of the MC, I want to welcome you to the session. So we are now on session 6 of our program. The nature of our session is a little bit different, but we'll get into the housekeeping issues once we've had a few of, I wanted us to start at 2:30, and we are 2 minutes from 2:30. Because I see there are a few people that are still trickling in. So with permission from yourselves, just a little bit of patience, we can start in the next 2 minutes, as I'm seeing people are now knocking off lunch, and we didn't want to miss a lot of us who might actually still be having lunch. So if you give me 2 minutes, and then I can start giving some of those housekeeping issues with permission from the MC. Thank you. We can start now. I'm going to invite the MC. She has a quick announcement to make, and then we can go into the housekeeping issues.
Hello everyone, I hope you enjoyed your lunch break. Just a quick announcement about the private sale that will happen at the room Sine, S-I-N-E. There will be local stylists that will be sharing, that will be exposing some clothes, like not like mine. This is, but everyday, all day outfits that you can keep in your luggage as souvenirs of our country, of our beautiful country. You'll love it. I think it's at 6 p.m. Just note it on your agendas. Thank you. Dinesh?
Fantastic. Thank you very much, colleagues. Welcome to session 6. Our session moderator is Danielle. I'll ask Danielle to come up and you can take it away. We still have a copy of, do you have it? Or you can look it on okay, cool, great stuff. Oh, fantastic. So I'm going to invite our session moderator, Danielle, to lead us into the session. And then we will proceed according to the program. And we are still waiting for, but don't worry. Some people will be trickling in as we go along. Fantastic.
Thanks to the MC and Tanashi. It's, again, my pleasure to be here. I won't be as rushed this time, so I will try to speak more slowly for everyone. Again, Danny Nierenberg, president and co-founder of Food Tank. So honored to be here, and I want to thank the organizers. I'm very excited to be part of this conversation on food sovereignty in Africa. Where is the balance, and how do governments walk the line between regional integration under the AFCFTA and attaining food self-sufficiency? So I will give a brief overview and then introduce the two speakers who we're so delighted to have. And then I will introduce our session moderators and the rapporteurs. So let me just quickly set the stage a little bit for the discussion. The AFCTA, the African Continental Free Trade Area, is a trade agreement that unites 55 African Union members, and it brings them into the largest free trade area in the world. This continental agreement has both significant costs and benefits, which we will talk about later and hopefully as part of the discussion. The AFCFTA aims to connect 1.3 this agreement will contribute to lifting an additional people from extreme poverty and 68 million people from moderate poverty. It's important to note that these estimates, though, are based on non-tariff trade barriers, like verifying that they meet sanitary and phytosanitary standards. So again, this could push small farmers out of regional value chains. And if small and medium farmers cannot compete with the bigger industrial-like agriculture production elsewhere on the continent, and geographical displacement. So finally, there are important issues in the trading sector that are not addressed by policies under the AFC. Sorry, I practiced this, and now I'm messing up. AFCFTA, for example, if non-tariff barriers keep the majority of farmers from participating in formal markets, the role of informal traders will continue or even grow, and many of these traders are women who will continue to face challenges like bureaucratic hurdles at borders or harassment or exploitation. So I will stop there. I just wanted to give you some context, and it is now my incredible honor to invite Dr. Nega Wubenye, the head of Markets and Trade at AGRA, to give remarks. Please welcome her to the stage. And I'm sorry that I messed up. I'm sorry.
Okay, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for inviting us to participate in your conference. This is actually my first time to be at an ANAPRI conference, despite being in the policy space for quite some time. Yeah, this session we co-organized it with ANAPRI. Trade is an important area that we have been working on. As you realize, the continent still imports a lot of food from the rest of the world. Depending which statistics you're looking at, tens of billions of dollars of goods is imported, and trends also show that this is going to grow even further. But these are really opportunities that can create economic growth and jobs and livelihood for our people. Despite the immense potential we have in the continent, the intra-regional trade between our countries, especially on agriculture and food, is quite limited compared to Europe and Asia and the other continents. As AGRA, we have been over the last 5 years, we have agri-trade for program. So in this, we are trying to address some of the key challenges in the continent. Some of them you mentioned already. Policy barriers and non-tariff trade barriers, as well as many restrictions are impeding the free flow of goods, foods and agricultural products within the continent. We are also working on a number of food baskets that cut across the continent, focusing on key commodities that are produced and consumed in multiple countries. This include, for instance, the rice in the West Africa ECOWAS region and horticulture program in the Eastern and Southern Africa. We are also trying to ease some of the regulatory bottlenecks mentioned earlier. Some of it is on food safety and quality standards. Countries do not seem to recognize each other's quality certifications, which has created quite huge, burden on cross-border traders. It causes them a lot of pain and bureaucracy, a lot of time and expenses trying to get permits from multiple agencies. So this has to do with trading regimes in the continent, which we are trying also to streamline. In addition to that, we have been supporting the African Continental Free Trade Area in developing an agri-trade action plan and strategy, focusing on selected few commodities that have been agreed at the African Union level. So this is the first step, in starting with a limited set of commodities to ease the barriers at the kick-starting the food trade in the continent. One of also the missing elements is data and evidence in the continent for governments to make evidence-based policy decisions, as well as for private sector to be aware of opportunities that exist for trade. So one of the big programs we have is with COMESA. One of my colleagues sitting there, Protas, is leading a program called Regional Food Balance Sheet. This is a program designed to provide real-time data on stocks, on prices, as well as expected harvests and production based on remote sensing satellite data that allows governments to make informed decisions. In many cases, when governments feel threatened by inadequate supply of food, as Osman showed this morning, have those barriers which traders cannot get around to available. So this is an area where ANAPRI and local research institutes can actually contribute in evidence and policy actions in order to
Okay, great. Okay, so very briefly the outline of my presentation. I'm going to give a brief introduction, then talk a little bit about food self-sufficiency versus food security, because I think the main important point here is food security, not food standpoint here is food security, not food self-sufficiency. I will also talk a little bit about regional trade and the potential to stabilize domestic food markets through regional trade, and then a few words about the AFCFTA, and then I will conclude. I think I have a limited amount of time, so I might go a bit quickly, but I think we have a Q&A session, so I can go back to some of these points during the Q&A. I would like to start with, it's moving fast. Oh, okay, here we go. So I wanted to start with a few definitions, actually. Maybe that's not the right audience to talk about definitions because we all work on agriculture or on agricultural trade, etc., etc. But just to start the discussion, of course, we have a lot of definitions. I've selected only a few of them, or two of them. The first one regarding food self-sufficiency, and another one for food security. As I mentioned, to me the key point is food security. Food self-sufficiency is just a kind of means to achieve food security. So when we look at food self-sufficiency, roughly speaking, it is just about the degree to which a particular country can meet its food needs with its own food production. When we measure it, generally we use the ratio of food production to domestic food consumption. You can measure it in quantity, in value, or in calories. It depends on the objective of the study, of course. So a quick caveat here, when we talk about food self-sufficiency, when we say that a country is self-sufficient, it doesn't mean that its food consumption exactly matches its production. Because you can have two-way trade. You can import and export and have a ratio of food production to food consumption higher than 100. Okay. So regarding food security, a quick definition from my colleagues from FAO. We achieve food security when all people have physical and economic access to adequate food for the means of its procurement without any discrimination or without the discrimination of any kind. And now we have a consensus. We know that it covers at least 4 dimensions: availability, access, utilization, and stability. And if you look at these 4 elements, you will quickly notice that we don't have a priori a direct causal link between all these dimensions and food self-sufficiency. The only dimension for which we might see a direct link will be probably availability. We know that when you increase your domestic production, probably you will increase the availability of food. But what about volatility? We don't know. It is much more complicated than that. Because you can expose your country more to domestic. On how shocks occur, you can actually increase your domestic production volatility, your food access volatility, by relying on your own food production rather than trading with the rest of the world. So we need to keep that in mind. You can also think of climate change. That's also to affect countries' comparative advantages. So when you think of food self-sufficiency, you also need to think about the future, what's going to happen. Very quickly, a graph showing the food self-sufficiency ratios in a selected number of countries, including Africa. As you can see, Africa is not self-sufficient, so you have on the right-hand side the definition of the ratio, production, overproduction plus imports minus exports. So you have a line 100 line, which shows you the threshold for being self-sufficient. As you can see, Africa is not self-sufficient, and a lot of countries in Africa, Kenya, Senegal, we are not self-sufficient. And all the countries that are shown here for Africa are not self-sufficient. But if you look at the average, we are about between 80 and 90% of self-sufficiency. Of course, it depends on the commodity you are looking at and also the specific country you are looking at. So we have a degree of heterogeneity. But on average, Africa is not food self-sufficient. And here, this is, because I don't have a lot of time, so this is just a kind of summary from what we can find from the literature regarding the links between food self-sufficiency and food security. As you can see, here we have a table with 4 cells. depending on the level of food self-sufficiency and also the level of food security. As you can see, we don't have a direct causal link. Food self-sufficiency is never a necessary nor a sufficient condition for food security. You have a series of countries that are food self-sufficient but not food secure. You have also the opposite. You have some countries that are not food self-sufficient but are food secure. And you have things also the other way around. So we really need to be careful about this concept. We don't have direct causal links between them. We can come back to that during the Q&A, during the discussions. There are a lot of things behind it, but we don't have time to go into all the details. The main message is, let's be careful. We don't have a direct link. We have a lot of dimensions we need to keep in mind. Here I am illustrating this with just 2 dimensions of food security: availability and stability. So on the x-axis, we have the level of food self-sufficiency, and on the y-axis, you have, for the first graph, the availability, and for the second graph, you have stability. The variable is the volatility of the domestic food price index. As we can see, for availability, we have a positive link between food self-sufficiency and availability, but for stability, as we can see, the line is kind of flat. We don't have any link, neither positive nor negative, between food self-sufficiency and the stability of food prices. Now, a few words about regional trade and domestic markets. How regional trade can help stabilize domestic markets. Should we rely only on our own food production, or should we trade within our neighbors? That's one of the questions. 2 graphs very quickly. The first one is the level of volatility and stability of cereal production. It is an aggregate level of cereal production. And the second slide on the right-hand side is in SADC, and the left-hand side is for ECOWAS. So what we have here is the ratio of the volatility of domestic production compared to regional production. Okay? So we compute the volatility for regional level, and we also compute it at the local level, at the domestic level, and then we take the ratio, so domestic to regional. As you can see, if we are above 1, it means that domestic production is more volatile than regional production. You have some examples in ECOWAS, as you can see, Cabo Verde, Gambia, Senegal, Sierra Leone, etc. And it is most the case in the SADC region, as you can see. In a lot of cases, the ratio is above 1. So for all those countries, domestic production is much more volatile than regional production. And if you combine that with the cross-correlation of productions, cross-country production correlation, so we take countries 2 by 2. So what we have here is pairwise country production correlations. And then we look at the share of correlations that are below a certain threshold. Here I'm selecting 0.65, I think. We have also 0.75 and so on. So we look at different levels, different thresholds, and we see what is the share of pairwise correlation which is below a threshold. So if you look at countries in ECOWAS, so the share of pairwise correlation below 0.65 is quite high in countries like Gambia, in Cote d'Ivoire, and also in Nigeria. But if you look at the SADC region, for almost all the countries, the share of country pairwise correlation below 0.65 is quite high for almost all the countries. Okay? And if you compare that, or if you add this feature to what we saw in the slide before, okay, when you compare domestic production and the regional production, and if you look at also the degree of pairwise correlations, you can see right now that for countries for which you have a low share of low value correlation levels, and also a level of regional production which is less volatile than regional production, you have a huge potential to stabilize your domestic food markets by trading with your neighbors, actually. You will have more volatility relying only on your own production. You are better trade with your neighbors to stabilize your domestic food markets. So basically, that's what I'm saying here in this slide. Okay, so in ECOWAS, it is the case for Cabo Verde, the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, and in SADC, as I show, it is the case for almost all countries. This means that we need to cooperate at the regional level, and we shouldn't rely on non-cooperative policies that we have seen in a lot of countries, bans, restrictions, export restrictions, things like that, because we can actually increase the volatility of our domestic markets with this type of measures, for both the country implementing it, but also for your neighbors. Now to finish, a few words about the IFCFTA. I think you already talked about that. I don't think I need to go into all the details because I think the head of AGRA, or not the head of AGRA, my colleague who talked just before me also mentioned those aspects, why we have the IFCFTA, what's the rationale of the IFCFTA. Briefly speaking, because Africa is the least open continent in the world, actually. If you look at the degree of protection vis-à-vis the rest of the world, but if you look at also intracontinental tariffs protection. So it is true for both aspects, vis-à-vis of the rest of the world, but also at the intracontinental level. As you can see, tariffs are quite high. I'm showing here some examples, and they are higher for agricultural products. You have a lot of non-tariff measures and overtrade costs. The share, we also mentioned that, the share of intra-African trade is low compared to other regions, so it is 13% on average. For agricultural products, it is 18%. And we know that we have complementary measures that I showed at the regional level. Actually, it is also true when you look at the continent as a whole. And we also know that given the crisis that occurred in the past 2 years, the Russia-Ukraine crisis, COVID-19, we know that there is need for more integration in Africa to reduce kind of our, because I say that we need to be careful about food self-sufficiency, etc., but there are pros and cons, actually. So to be highly dependent on countries or regions for which the market is highly concentrated, that can be an issue as well. So this is the other side of the topic we need to keep in mind. So the Russia-Ukraine crisis illustrated that if you look at cereals, fertilizer, etc. So that's a kind of exception. Also, we have a lot of overlapping rates in Africa. Okay? If you take a country like DRC or Kenya, they are part of free rates, at least. Okay? So we have this overlapping rates that Bagwati call the spaghetti bowl, and it's a huge cost, actually, for private sector, etc. You have a lot of rules of origin, rules, etc. You need to do live, etc. So the FCFTA could be a good strategy to get rid of all those overlapping rights, even if the status quo should be is the rule during the FCFTA. So we have high expectation, and you already mentioned that. Very quickly, the low share of intra-African trade that you just mentioned, here I'm showing it. As you can see, we are at 13% of intra-continental trade on average, but for agricultural products it is 18%, something like that. Of course, it depends on the countries or region, the rate you are looking at. The most integrated region is SADC, actually, well above 30%. And this is quite low compared to other regions, but two caveats here. Agricultural trade is mostly informal in Africa, and we almost rely on official statistics, and we know that they highly underestimate true trade flows. So we should be cautious when we look at the figures. And the shares are also can be misleading if you compare different regions, because it depends on the number of countries in the REC and also of the size of the countries in the REC. So when you compare different RECs, different regions, with different number of countries and with different sizes, you need to be careful, because the trade relationships between those countries will be different, depending on their number, how fragmented the region is, and how big, how large the countries are. So these are two caveats. Very quickly, some summaries regarding the impact of the AFCFTA. Here I'm showing the main studies you can find in the literature, including one from IFPRI and another one from our colleagues at UNICA and CEPI, etc. So to keep it simple, you can just look at the last line, so which is the impact. I'm showing all this to show that why we have different results, why the result diverge, why the figures are not the same, because we don't use the same data set, we don't use the same models, we don't simulate the same scenarios, etc. So we are not going to find the same results. So the impact vary. So for our study, we found that intra-African trade will increase by 18%, but as you can see, our colleagues from the World Bank, they find 81%, for instance, but they simulate the reduction of tariffs, of NTMs, of trade in services. They also implement some trade facilitation measures that we don't implement. So depending on how scenario you simulate, so your impacts are not going the same. So what about agricultural trade? Actually, we don't know. We don't have a clear-cut answer regarding agricultural trade, whether it's going to be. You have contradictory results in the literature, but I'm showing one of the most important ones from our colleagues at UNICA and CEPI. So the result is that by 2045, intra-African trade in agri-food will increase by 41%. So if we have to keep a figure in mind, it should be that, probably. And one thing to notice is that this result depends mainly on the assumption you made. And this is important. You know that in the FCFTA, you have sensitive products, you have also products that you can exclude. You can exclude 3%, provided that they don't represent more than 10% of intra-African trade. So if you look at market access offers, for most regions, actually agricultural products are excluded. They are treated either as sensitive or excluded. So depending on how countries or rates are going to include or exclude agricultural products, the result is not going to be the same. And most countries, regions actually include agricultural products in their sensitive or excluded product for food sovereignty, food self-sufficiency, or food security reasons. And NTMs are also large for agricultural products compared to non-agricultural products. That's a stylized fact that you will see in the literature. And the ad valorem equivalent of whose non-tariff measure can be very, very high. Sometimes it is high, more than 100% actually, compared to tariffs. So very, very huge level of non-tariff measures. And agricultural products are also mainly subject to bribes, illegal payment, and road harassment, which is also a significant cost that I just illustrate with an example in West Africa. And this allows me to say that liberalizing trade is not enough. This is an example in ECOWAS, where trade has been liberalized since many years ago. It is now a customs union, but even before being a customs union, we had a free trade area, so trade was liberalized. For agricultural products, we don't even have rules of origin, so it is supposed to be completely free. But look at what's happening. This is something we did with our colleagues from SEALS. So here you have illicit payments and time lost at illegal checkpoints in Africa. The left-hand axis is the amount of illicit payment per trip on average, and the right axis is the time spent lost at illegal checkpoints. It has been decreasing, but if you look at where we started from in 2015, per trip you can spend as much as $350 per trip, right? And lost almost 600 minutes, more than I don't know how many hours. You can do the math yourself, but this is a huge amount for a wreck in which we are supposed to be a free trade area or a customs union. So even if the AFCFTA takes place, if we have this kind of illegal practices, road harassment, bribes, illegal payments, it's not going to be effective. Liberalizing tariffs or NTMs will not be enough, because you can see the ad valorem equivalent. We computed the ad valorem equivalent of those illegal payments and time lost for the corridors that were monitored by SEALs. Once again, in West Africa, you can see for a corridor like the one from Abidjan to Lagos in Nigeria, the ad valorem equivalent is about 20%. So it's equivalent to a 20% tariff. So this is quite high. If you look at the structure of ECOWAS CET, you just have a fifth band with a very few products for which you have a 35% tariff. But for the remaining products, for all of them, the maximum tariff is 20%. So you have here an ad valorem equivalent, which is almost the same like the highest tariff band of ECOWAS. So liberalizing trade without addressing these issues will be a kind of time loss to me. So to conclude, food security is a complex notion, I will say, with a lot of dimension. I will say that food self-sufficiency is not a panacea. You need to look at country specificities, which type of products we are talking about. Is the market for these products is concentrated at the world level or at the regional level? How volatile is this market, etc., etc. And also trade policy is not always the best option. In many cases, it is the second best option. If you have an issue at the production level, you should target directly the problem. Okay, with, I don't know, a subsidy or something like directly linked to production. If you use trade policy, this is kind of second best option. For sure, we are going to introduce a distortion somewhere. And there is a potential of regional trade to stabilize domestic markets. This is true at the REC level or to at the continental level. We could have done the same exercise with Africa as a whole instead of RECs. It will be the same. And the FCTA is a timely initiative, I will say, but it needs to be ambitious and with some complementary measures to make sure that when we liberalize everything, we don't have extra costs. I think I'm running out of time. I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And I have a lot of slides during the Q&A. I can talk about them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you both Dr. Traore and Dr. Wubenye. I think this sets some very valuable context. And what I heard is that from both speakers is that because of cascading crises of the climate crisis, the biodiversity loss crisis, our health crisis, conflict around the globe, there is a need for improving food security and resilience to shocks and disruption through stabilizing markets. And there is a need for improving data for evidence-based policy decisions and coordination of trade regionally. Whether the AFCFTA can address these challenges remains to be seen, but I'm hoping during these discussion groups that you're going to have now, and I will go ahead and introduce the 4 groups and their moderators and the rapporteurs. One of the questions that I'd like you to consider as you're talking is to focus on really the title of this session, where the balance is. Does trade policy in your country fit in with the principles of the AFCFTA framework? And if they do, what can be put in place to ensure that those who are most vulnerable, women and children, are included and not left behind? So, do you want me to introduce the groups? Okay, so group 1 will focus on unlocking Africa's agricultural potential through the AFCFTA. The moderator is, again, Dr. Husseini Traore. He will be the rapporteur again. And group 4, navigating market disruptions and enhancing trade. The moderator is Dr. Wubenye, again from AGRA, and the rapporteur is Dr. Zainab Mapenda from the University.
Perfect.
Good?
Perfect. So if you check your tag holder, it has a specific color. So if it's a gray tag holder, you are going to be probably in group 1. If it's a blue one, you're in group 2. If it's pink, you're in group 3. And if it's green, you are in group 4. If it's orange, that's a Detola for you. So, a Detola. So what we want to do in this session, unless if you are probably VIP, then you can choose where you want to go. So what we are going to do, colleagues, we want to spend the next 15 minutes
I will keep a timer, by the way.
Yes, in each of these groups, right? And I'm going to probably just call the rapporteurs right now. We will just huddle because we don't want people to get out of the room and then you might probably end up somewhere roaming around and having coffee. So we really want you to stay engaged. So Dr. Florence Louisa, where is Dr. Florence? So you are the rapporteur for Group 1.
Round of applause for Dr. Louisa.
So Dr. Louisa is rapporteur for Group 1, and I will ask Dr. Louisa to move to a spot where we can, everybody who is in Group 1 will go and huddle around Dr. Louisa, and Dr. Traore will be the moderator for that group. And Dr. Traore, I'm going to give you this. There are some guiding questions there which you can ask the session participants in Group 1, and those are the questions for which you will use to discuss the topic. Then on Group 2, we have Bill Burke. So Bill, you are moderating Group 2, and your moderator is Tim. Where's Tim?
Rapporteur.
The rapporteur,
is
sorry.
Yeah.
The rapporteur is Tim. So Tim, you can hold the number. So you guys can go, and everybody who's in Group 2 can huddle around Bill and Tim. So oh yeah, I'll give you this is your spot. Yeah, so the guiding questions there will inform that discussion. All right, and then Group 3, that's the orange, the orange color. Your Milu is the moderator for Group 3. So anyone who is already, Brian Mulenga, you will be the, so you guys can go somewhere and say, so you have no choice, but you will be, so you guys can go somewhere, huddle, and then we can, you can have the guiding questions. Brian? But you can use this just to make sure you self-identify. Then Group 4, Nega, you are the moderator, and the rapporteur is Dr. Zaina Mpenda. So Dr. Zaina, you will be Group 4. Yes. So you can, Zaina, you can hold the placard just for everybody who seems not to have a group can also you can go to Group 4. Which group you can, anywhere where you are passionate about. Okay, so you can go to Group 2. I think you have the liberty to join it. So colleagues, yes. Do you want? Okay. Let me remove my problem. Let me remove this and put it. Thank you so much. So colleagues, you will have 15 minutes. 15 minutes.
I just set a timer, everyone. You have 15 minutes.
15 minutes.
Huddle up. Get to work.
I know that we are supposed to end at 15:45, but I'm thinking that plenary was supposed to be when we started late. We lost like after.
Do you want the rapporteurs to come on stage to report back? What do you want?
To do so, it will be good to report back on the basis of the discussions.
Great.
But we can keep it 5 minutes.
Yeah.
For each.
That's perfect. And I can ask a follow-up if necessary, but yeah, that's great.
Then that keeps us honest, at least first.
Yeah.
We need that feedback from the. But actually, the program, I was saying afterwards, we have. So Julius, like, I'm now thinking because Julius, I suspect, is part of the. Thanks for that. To our online participants, we will ask that you take a 15-minute coffee break. But we promise that after the 15-minute coffee break, you can benefit from the insights that are being gathered in the room. Yeah, we hope next year we can find a way of making our online participants more involved. We had not anticipated the cafe-style session had not taken into account the online participants. We apologize sincerely, but if you can come back after, now it's almost like what, the 13 minutes, you can. We will do a report back, and the session rapporteurs just pay attention to. You will be required to report to the plenary.
Everyone, this is your 5-minute warning, so you might want to start wrapping up. Your 1-minute warning, 1-minute warning, everyone. All right, we're ready to stop. You've actually had 20 minutes, so I gave you more time. No. This is it. I gave you more time earlier. Everyone needs to finish.
Congratulations, everybody. We managed. Fantastic, yes. We can leave the rapporteurs to clean up their notes and work out some of the things that were about to be said or the ideas that were still cooking. Thank you very much. To our online audience, thank you for your patience. We appreciate your patience, and we are happy that you are still with us. We are about to enter into the last segment of our session. Thank you so much, colleagues. Merci. Okay. So
I can invite the rest of us.
yes. So do you want us to give them a minute?
Just one more minute for everyone to sort of get settled, and then we'll call the rapporteurs on stage to just give brief remarks.
Fantastic.
So one more minute, everyone.
Tim, Brian, who else?
We have Florence, Tim, Brian,
Florence.
and Zena.
Zena. We invite you on stage to give a quick summary of.
So we're going to invite the four
the comfortable
rapporteurs
chairs.
on stage. So Brian, get up here. Zena, Tim, Florence.
Dr.
All right, we're missing two rapporteurs.
Dr. Florence Luisa, Dr. Zena Mpenda, colleagues, thank you very much.
We're going to wait 2 more minutes for the other rapporteurs, and then we're going to get started. We're short on time, everyone. Can someone snag Zena and Florence, please?
Dr. Zena Mpenda is here on her way. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I didn't see you.
Florence is at the back.
Get on up here, Florence. Come on.
She's on her way. Okay, while we are waiting for Dr. Florence Luisa to come up front with the rest of the cast, I'll hand over to Danielle to facilitate this segment. So you've had a few moments to discuss the key thematic issues. Oh, you want to present from here? The other guys are sitting at the top. Wherever you're comfortable.
Wherever you're most comfortable. I don't bite. I'm not that hungry.
Thank you very much, colleagues. So we've had a few minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes actually, to go through the topical issues around trade, resilience building, food self-sufficiency. So I'm going to hand over to our moderator so that she can take us into the next segment of our session.
Great, thank you, Tanashi. So I'm so excited that these seem to be going well, that you were talking amongst yourselves, and they seemed really robust. So I don't want to put you all on the spot too much, but I do want to hear from each of you what were the main takeaways from each group. And Florence, I'm sorry, since you're group 1, I'm going to start with you, if that's okay. If you can tell us, 2 or 3 of the key takeaways from what you heard in the group.
Hello, everyone. From what we had in the group, we had 3 questions. So I guess I'll pick out the key issue from each of the sections. So regarding question 1, it was asking how can the AfCFTA and continental trade policies be leveraged to create inclusive market systems to meet consumer demands with emphasis on accessible data for policymakers. So I guess the key issue here was reducing the trade restrictions that we have, and this was through different measures, for example, simplifying trade regimes, and then having also recognition of mutual recognition of agreements to facilitate, to enhance market participation, reducing trade by removal of trade restrictions. And then for point 2, what systems can be implemented for long-term data collections and evidence generation? We dwelt a little bit so much on that one, and the key points here mentioned that one way to be able to increase long-term data collection was to have a simplified system whereby, for example, the farmers can be able to do, or maybe traders, to do self-reporting through simplified apps, maybe using mobile phones, and then they can be able to share the data that they have, and then that can be compared with existing databases to see how accurate they are. And then also having a simplified market information system, whereby you can be able to track information right from maybe the subnational levels to the national, and even the international levels. So there are different initiatives being taking place that are collecting market information at different levels by different actors. So can there be one system that can connect all those different levels and then have accessible market data? Then of course also the issues of data protection was also important, given that you're dealing with the private sector. So there should be something in place to protect the data. And then for question 3, how can we enhance, how can digital solutions be leveraged to track and forecast food availability, pricing, accessibility, and then weather conditions? One thing that we saw in terms of using digital solutions, that what is normally taking place, there are food balance sheets produced, but mostly through economic modeling. So could there be a trail whereby maybe other applications, maybe remote sensing, machine learning, are used to inform the economic modeling and then to produce maybe the food balance sheets? So combining the existing approaches with the economic modeling to produce reliable food balance sheets. We saw it as a good approach. However, there was a however whereby we shouldn't rely so much only on the modeling, but also do the ground truthing to compare whether what we have on ground is the same as what we have with the modeling systems. But also they should be, for that to be able to work, if you're having remote sensing, you're having machine learning, you have the economic modelers, so there has to be some institutional arrangements to make sure that data is transferred from one system to the other. So all the producers of the data are able to work together and then have the coordinated system. So institutional arrangements need to be in place to have that. And then of course monitoring how the data is being used, whether it's being used for the right purpose. And then also we saw that there are quite a number of modeling tools that are there, but mostly focusing on production, where we saw the gap was with the markets. So we need some digital tools for the markets, for example, showing where the product locations are, where there's sufficient production, where maybe the price, tracking price data. And again, this should be tracked right from the national, the subnational, even to the global markets. So having a clear a digital system for tracking markets. Yeah, I think those were the key points from my group.
Give Florence a round of applause, everyone. That was excellent. Thank you for sharing all that. All right, Tim, you were in the rapporteur for Group 2. Do you want to give your takeaways?
Sure, thanks. So for our group, we looked at what are the best practices that can be developed to balance national food security needs with regional economic integration goals, especially regarding local processing capacities. So to begin with, we identified the establishment of regional food balance sheets as a best practice, and we had examples like in ECOWAS. However, we noted that besides this, there's need for other interventions as well. So first, food is mainly stored as grain, so it has to be rotated. And one of the things is that, especially when you think about processing, you can actually store the product, the end product, other than the grain, which can stay for a bit longer. Then when you think about how we can enhance processing. Within the region, there is need to take advantage of the different countries' strength and comparative advantages in production, so that instead of trying to produce, you can allow people who can produce specific products comparatively to do that, and then try to see how we can enhance movement of trade, movement of these products from one way to the other. One way in which this can be achieved is through, for example, infrastructure, especially transportation infrastructure. And for this to happen, within the region, there has to be like an agreement on the different standards. So, for example, if you think of a railway system, if you have all of you using the same gauge, then you minimize the time spent where you have to stop and load and reload, but then it can actually move easy. And then countries can also make investments that can help move food, and this not only addresses the region integration, but it also helps food move from surplus areas to deficit areas. In terms of investments also in agro-processing, again, this can be coordinated, and like mentioned, taking advantage of the locating or putting these investments in areas that are near the surplus production areas, so that then you can, instead of moving the actual commodity, you move the product that has been processed, which is much easier and more convenient. Then we also looked at what are the roles that AFCTA can play, and I think we recognize that there has been a lot of talk of the tariff barriers, but the actual problem within the region is the non-tariff barriers. So we think that, for example, harmonizing standards across different countries can easily move. So if you think of right now, if you're moving one product for the other, if you have different standards, if you're a trader, then you have to comply, with the standards of which country that you're moving forward. I mean, you're moving your product to. So if those are harmonized, then it kind of makes it easier for the traders to comply. In terms of SMEs and the role they can play in this, I think in our discussion, we recognize that SMEs, especially in ag, come in form of traders and aggregators. Although they have been painted mainly as a barrier and taking advantage of farmers, they do play a big role in helping aggregate and move product across space and time. However, we also noted that sometimes they have to compete with government policies. So if you think about the grain reserves, because these tend to be ad hoc, so when either you are doing stock outs or stock-ins, they tend to be crowded out. So if that can be streamlined, then that can actually ease them and kind of enhance the role they play within the sector. And I think the other point I wanted to make is that if you are able to harmonize standards, it also enhances their compliance with standards. So then that becomes like an enabler. And still a lot can be done in terms of building their capacity to regulatory compliance of some of these standards. So that's what we came up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Give him a round of applause, please. That was great. Thank you so much. All right, Brian, you were the rapporteur for Group 3. I'm so excited to hear what you found out.
Thanks. So in our group, our question was how can we build resilient food systems and markets? So we had two broad questions. The first one was what are the innovative solutions for improving food production and processing for nutritious food access? So to begin with, I think there was a note that when we're talking about food systems, it's not just focusing on production and processing, but it's the entire process from production all the way to distribution. So that was just as a side note. But I think one thing that was very prominent in terms of production and processing was the embracing of digital technology in terms of improving smallholder farmers' yields. How can we borrow some of the high-tech, sort of technologies that large-scale commercial farmers are using, and make them available to smallholder farmers so that they can improve their yields and produce the food more efficiently. And then there was need for an assessment to identify, varieties that are suitable for given, for different agroecological conditions within the different countries to help improve yields. And also the need to disseminate technologies that just don't focus on improving yields, but also reducing post-harvest losses. For example, the type of seed varieties, some seed varieties, you find that, yes, the yields are good, but post-harvest losses might be high. So there's need to strike a balance between the two. Then also promote irrigation technologies that are affordable, especially for smallholder farmers, to help them adapt to climate change, especially the droughts. And then the other issue was around, especially at processing level, how do we build capacity of the SMEs to be able to access finance to invest in affordable processing equipment, and also looking at renewable energy, which can be very key in enhancing processing, especially at the local community levels where the primary production is taking place, so that value is added within the same areas where production is taking place. And then on technology again, there was a discussion around how do we develop technologies that will improve efficient payment systems for ag SMEs and just generally agricultural trading. This can help with efficient marketing. Then also formalize some of the agricultural value chains. I think there's lots of informality in our agriculture value chains, so there's need to formalize these value chains. Also embracing AI and ICT in extension, as well as advisory services such as weather information dissemination to help farmers make informed decisions. And then we had also a question on the role of data. I think there was I think on data, we said I think data is very key for almost everything that we're trying to achieve. If you're looking at technology adoption, you really need to understand what are the factors that will drive adoption. If you're looking at value addition, you need to find out what the supply side and demand side choke points and enablers are. So I think to collect data on a daily basis or weekly basis. And then at a regional level, at a national level, they need to create or strengthen existing food security task force, that are very key in providing information on early warning, in terms of food security, and these have to be really food security dashboard, which is standardized to ensure that the different centers are able to collect data around food security within their countries and feed it directly into the dashboard, so that information is sort of available in real time for all the centers within ANAPRI to be able to see, where food insecurity hotspots are, the drivers are, and already. I think that was all from our group. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Brian. Give him a round of applause, please. We're nearing time, but we have one more. Zina, please share your remarks with us.
Yes, thank you. Our group 4, we had a question which had 2 parts. So the question was, how can Africa market develop adaptive policies that anticipated the market disruptions, ensuring that data collection is sustained and effective over the long period? So we started with the discussion looking at, not all on the same understanding. So said having collaboration with a research center that provide information about risk and in a continuous process, I can say, they were able now at least to predict some of the things that can happen and therefore take some mitigation measures. Then we also say we also need to develop some monitoring systems that can address the system. So first you need to have a system to know the risks, and then be able to have the risk management systems, and then have a monitoring system to address those disasters, to be able to monitor them, some protocols in place. But these protocols need to be reviewed periodically, because if they're not reviewed, you might have a system there, you might have a protocol, and then it's on the shelf. So things can happen, and you will not be able to monitor them. So we need to have a periodical review of these protocols. And then we also went to an extent and say, yeah, we have some disasters, but some of these disasters are no longer disasters because they recur very often. Something like climate change is no longer a disaster now, is because we know it happens. So we also need to consider those disasters that are no longer in the category of disaster and see how we can manage them. And the idea is that we can have 2 levels of our assessment. We can have systems that manage risks, but we can have systems of see what if the risk has happened, then what's next. So we need to have the different layers, different levels, and be able to monitor them. And to do this one, we need to have data. So data is very critical. We need to have historical data that can allow us to be able to capture the trends, can be able to allow us to capture those shocks. So we need data on shocks. We need maybe data like production data to be in place. But then we also said, yes, we can have the data, but if we have some models that can can look at the interactions of this data, that could be also a better thing. So a model for the agricultural economy, that will be the best to have in place. Then the second part, we're now looking at what can think tank like ANAPRI do to support the development of robust data system. And for that one, we raised 2 points because the time by that one, we didn't have time. So first we say we can have data management system, an automated data management system that we can use to get data. An example was given, I could not get that one correctly, but it's something like operational data decision platform. This is an automated data management system. The other thing is that we said we could establish collaboration, like what our colleague did with BIFAP in South Africa. They collaborated with the partner, the government, and they always have, because they've established a model, so every time they will provide what are the risks and how often can they open. So they are always giving them information in advance. So we can establish this collaboration to ensure that we have some models that can predict some of these risks. Yeah, so that is what we've managed to capture.
That was excellent. Please give her a round of applause. So in the final few minutes we have left, I'm just going to identify some of the words and phrases that came up throughout each of the rapporteurs' remarks. And data is obviously a huge part of that. Data is key for everything, and there needs to be it needs to be more collaborative between the private sector and researchers. There's a need, obviously, for harmonizing standards. I loved the thoughts about better infrastructure and coordination for multiple reasons. One, to prevent post-harvest losses and food loss and food waste, but better processing so that processing can take place where the crops are grown and hopefully get better prices for farmers. That's what I took from that. That we also need to take the advantage of the strengths within regions. I think that's very important. I also heard that we can borrow some high tech from some of the bigger industrial farms and combine them with lower tech technologies for small and medium farmers. So I feel like that combination of high and low tech could be really impactful in across the regions where ANAPRI is working. That there's a need for better assessment of crop varieties that are suitable for each region, and that there is a great need for SMEs to have finance so that they can do processing and sales effectively. What else did I hear? Risk management, definitely better monitoring for emergencies, but also the need to constantly be updating what the protocol for responding to those emergencies looks like. I was really interested in this idea that climate change can't be looked at as a disaster anymore. It should be looked at as an ongoing crisis, and how do you manage it? So that's something that stuck out for me. And then collaboration on how think tanks and governments can work on risk together. And that, I think, sums it all up. I think this is a very interesting conversations you all had. I will be interested in how ANAPRI takes these results forward. But I felt like it was very robust and rich. Did all of you? Yeah? How about all of you? Did you feel like these were good conversations? Great. Then you did your jobs. That is the end of this session. We have about 15 minutes for the break, right, Tanashi? Do you want to take over and tell everyone what to do?
Colleague, sorry. I'm in a rush. Thanks, Danielle, for some sterling work. And I want to thank everybody for your patience, for your time. I think this was a very good interactive session. The only session that is different from any session that we have done so far. My guidance from now, I think we were supposed to have been starting session 7 at 4, but it's already 5 after 4. And it's one of the more exciting sessions, which I would encourage everybody to come. So I also want to maybe ask if we could get maybe 15 minutes break where people are just probably socializing, having coffee, networking, and then we will be ready in by 20 past 4 to start. I think we can already start by 4:30 we start. We would have lost 30 minutes for that session. It was supposed to be 2 hours. We'll try to do it in 1.5 hours. It's on demonstrating impact from the PPVC project. I think you will want to see this because there's a number of aspects of the work that we would want to share with you, the results that we want to share with you. Okay, so we will adjourn for now and look forward to seeing you in the next session. Thank you very much. And round of applause for everybody for remaining engaged, especially after lunch. Thank you.
Big round of applause for Tanashi. He's doing a great job.
Bill Burke, Milu Muyanga, can you please, hold on colleagues, can we have the moderators as part of the pictures? Bill Burke, Milu Myanga, and who else was one of our moderators? The other moderators, the other two moderators was Dr. Famin, Dr. Traore. Who else was part of the John Olwande? Were you part of the moderators? Or who was chairing? I feel like I'm missing a moderator. We want a picture.